Alrighty, so an official good evening to everybody. So we'd like you to meet your hosts of this virtual Bobcat talk. So my name is Mary Gannon. I am the Wildlife Outreach Coordinator for the Rhode Island Division of Fish and Wildlife. This is my job, connecting Rhode Islanders to our wildlife resources in a variety of creative ways, most recently virtually. So thank you for bearing with us and joining us and being eager to learn about Rhode Island's wildlife and the conservation work that we're doing. I'll turn it to Gabby if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So hello, everybody. My name is Gabby. I'm the Technical Outreach Assistant for the Division of Fish and Wildlife. So I help Mary doing outreach programs. And then I also help with the volunteer program. So if you're interested in volunteering, you can also volunteer for a lot of our projects that we do, which we'll talk, or which you saw a little bit about in the video that we just showed. So I'll let Amy introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Amy. I work for the University of Rhode Island on a couple different research projects, and everything I work on is funded through DEM. So my lab works really closely with all of the biologists at DEM, and I love working with Mary and Gabby and sharing our research with all of you people.
Awesome. So that's us in a nutshell. So Gabby loves snakes, I love birds, and Amy loves all things fuzzy, like bobcats. This is like my favorite picture ever. Amy holding a bobcat, and she's going to talk a lot about the research, why she's holding that bobcat like that, and the research that we've done in partnership with URI. So we're really excited to have her here. So before we jump into bobcats, Gabby, do you want to just tell everybody about our state management areas? And if you've heard this spiel before, if you've come to one of our programs, you definitely know this. But for those folks who are new to joining us on a program, we'd love to share some information about our state land, and that's open for you to visit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just posted in the chat the link to the outdoor recreation map. So if you're interested in visiting any of our state management areas, they're all throughout the state. So on that map that you can see on the screen, those green blobs, those are all our state management areas. So the Division of Fish and Wildlife helps manage over 60,000 acres of land, and all that habitat is really important because it's conserved for generations to come. So it will always be there for wildlife, and it has all of the resources that wildlife needs to survive. So really important for wildlife, but you're also welcome to visit there if you want to hike or bike or hunting is allowed there. And right now it is hunting season, so you have to make sure that you're wearing your fluorescent orange. So we've got that little calendar there where you can see when you're supposed to wear orange and how much. So in the beginning of September, you need to start wearing your orange all the way until the end of May. So 200 square inches now, and then in December during the shotgun deer season, you need to wear your 500 square inches, so a hat and a vest.
So we welcome everybody to get out there. I mean, we've had a beautiful fall, so I hope that everybody takes a chance to look online. And we have a whole, map system. You can check out which management area is closest to you. So get out there and enjoy your state land. So let's jump into bobcats. So a little bit of history about bobcats here in New England. So bobcats are native to New England. They have always been here. So there was probably a time where bobcats were not as common as they were in the past, and that's because they were considered varmints. So anything with sharp teeth that is a carnivore or a predator, the settlers viewed as a varmint and a threat, a nuisance, and so they introduced bounty hunting for these animals. So for things like bobcats, bears, wolves, and mountain lions, which we once had in the state, but no longer. Some species made a comeback, like bears and bobcats, but other species like wolves and mountain lions did not, because our habitat changed. A lot of it was developed, and it's just a different picture now today than it was at the time of the colonists. So unfortunately, bobcats experienced that decline. There were no hunting regulations on bobcats or any other game species. So that led to the decline of not just things with sharp teeth, but also things that people like to eat, like deer and turkey. So believe it or not, there was a time in Rhode Island where you'd be hard pressed to find a wild turkey or a white-tailed deer, which is astounding today, because you can walk down any street and probably see a wild turkey. I've seen them in some very interesting places. You know, at suburban Johnston, in the middle of a very busy intersection, we had 3 turkeys last year that were wreaking havoc. So things do bounce back. Some things are more adaptable than others. And so as we see this decline in our native wildlife, states started to jump on board and start to create game laws. And Massachusetts was the first state in New England to classify the bobcat as a game species. And it took them until 1969 to classify this as a game species. So when you're a game species, you're typically protected by law, because that means that that animal can only be harvested during a particular season. And then there are bag limits on that animal, so you can only take so many. So for a wild turkey right now, the bag limit is 2 per hunter per season. So 1 would be on state land, 1 would be on private land. It used to be 1, but our turkey population has exploded so much that it can sustain 2 per hunter. And so that, having those regulations, those bag limits and the season lengths, that greatly shrinks the amount of animals that are being taken out of the population legally. At least there's always people who poach and think that the rules don't apply to them. But that, once it was classified as a game species in Massachusetts, that really set the stage to like, okay, we're gonna help these animals, and we're gonna make sure that this is a resource that we're going to manage sustainably, to make sure that they don't disappear entirely from the state. So that's just a little bit of background on the bobcat. One of these, this picture here, and all of the trail camera pictures that you see throughout this presentation are pictures that were taken in Rhode Island by trail cameras as part of one of our studies. So we're going to do a little bit of trivia. If you have come to our virtual programs before, you know that we love trivia. So Gabby, do you want to kick us off with trivia question 1?
Yes. So number 1, what kinds of habitats do bobcats like? So you can go ahead and type your answers in the chat, and we'll see what everyone comes up with. And once we get a bunch of answers, we'll reveal correct one. Seeing woods, open fields, shrubby, suburban areas, where rabbits and mice live. Might be onto something there. Open fields near lakes, forest and marsh, wooded. All right. The reveal?
The reveal our answer.
All right, so you were all right. So they live just about everywhere. So they can live in forests, in swamps, rocky ledges. They are habitat generalists. So they'll live wherever there are resources abundant. So if there's a resource there, that's where the bobcat's going to be. They will even den underneath people's sheds. So they don't hibernate in the wintertime. They're active all year round, but when they're rearing their kittens, they're young, they will sometimes bring them underneath people's sheds or underneath rocks or underneath big logs or in holes in logs. And so you can find them just about anywhere, but they are very hard to find because they're so secretive that you don't see them very often. So you might think, I don't have any bobcats near me, I've never seen one, but that isn't necessarily the case. We're learning more about habitat use, and Amy's going to talk a lot more about the study that she's doing, but kind of seeing where they prefer to live. But they can be found all throughout North America. They are the most widespread feline in North America, and I believe the most abundant as well. So keep your eye out because they might be out. They're typically crepuscular, so active dawn and dusk, but they can be seen out in the middle of the day as well. So always keep your eye out, see if you can see one dash across the road. That's when I saw one before, and I know Mary's seen them before, but I've only seen them, I think 3 times in my life, and I'm outside all the time. So you would think I would see them everywhere if they're that abundant, but they're very sneaky. They're hard to find.
They don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
They're just like, leave me alone. So this one, I love this picture. I think this is from North Kingstown. This guy wandering through a neighborhood. This is somebody's driveway. You can see their car right here. So he's just in a suburban neighborhood passing through. And then this one's out in the middle of nowhere, Rhode Island. I'm not sure where this one was taken, but this was taken this February. I just love his little face. He's just enjoying that winter sunlight. Okay, trivia question number 2. So how much do bobcats weigh? So here's one walking across some ice, also taken this February. let's take a guess. And I think we may have seen that in the chat, but we could take some guesses here. Right, so I'm seeing 30 pounds, males about 35, 75, 70 pounds, 8 to 16 pounds, up to 40 pounds. We've got a broad range, 20 pounds, 25 to 40, average 20 to 35. All right, so we got some kind of a wide scale. So it's about 15 to 30 pounds is the average weight of a bobcat. So, and Amy, of course, can talk about some of the ones that she's seen. I know the one bobcat that I saw with Amy as part of the tracking study was very big. he was pretty chubby. That one that was in the trap there. But
yeah, they look a lot bigger than they are when you go to weigh them, because people will say, oh, my cat is almost 30 pounds and is a lot smaller. They seem to look a lot bigger than they actually are.
Yeah, they got a lot of fur, that like fluffy, big floofy fur around their face. This one I included this trail camera picture. This was not part of our study, but this was sent to our office because folks sent it. And if you see a bobcat or a bear or a coyote that looks interesting, we've gotten pictures of coyotes that are completely blonde or white or black. So if you see anything interesting, feel free to email it to our office or to me or to Gabby, because we're always excited to have observations. So this one was sent to us just by a member of the public, and they said, oh my gosh, is this a cougar? Like, it looks so big. Like, what is going on in this picture? So you can see the animal's head here, and then this right here looks like it could be a long tail, right? So you don't have any scale in this photo because this is an open field, but if you look really closely, this little black dot where my mouse is, that's the bobbed tail of the bobcat. They have that black tipped tail. So that's the bobcat's leg, the back leg. So they're very lanky. They've got very, very long legs. We have a taxidermied bobcat in the office that is very tall. It's like this long string bean legs. So they've got these long legs and that little tiny short tail, but this goes to show you, like, they can look big on a trail camera or depending on the scale and the direction you're looking at them. But they're not over 30 pounds. So they're actually pretty small. Okay. Oh, and Gabby tossed this in here. Everybody can see it. There's a little corgi. So that's about the size of a corgi. That's about as much as they weigh. Just a cute little guy. All right. So Gabby is
all right. So trivia number 3. Pick out the bobcat track. Do you think it's track A or track B? A lot of B's.
A lot of B's. I saw 1A.
1A.
A lot of B's. Wow, rapid fire. everybody's answering. Okay, we got some A's. All right. And the reveal.
Reveal.
There we go. Oops. There we go.
All right. So all the B's had it. So track B is correct. And someone said claws retract, and you're absolutely right. So bobcats, just like a house cat, they can retract their claws, unlike canines. So they're feline, so they can retract those claws. And when they're walking, typically there are no claw marks. So that is one tip to identifying a bobcat track. They can sometimes, like if their claws are out, then it will make a mark. But the other way to tell is looking at the pads. So if you look, the front of the heel pad on the bobcat has those 2 lobes, and then the back of it has 3 lobes, where if you look at the canine one, then it only has 1 on the front and then only 2 on the back. That's the other way to tell. Also, bobcat tracks and like feline tracks, they kind of look like smushed. And then the canine tracks look kind of like more spread out. You could draw an X between the toes and the heel pad, like a straight X like that. It's another way to tell. And so you can always look for those if you're looking for signs. And then someone said, is the lobe pattern the same for domestic cats? It would be. I think it's all felines have that same kind of pattern. So you can look at your domestic cat tracks if you ever see them, and you can see if you can identify it. Obviously, sometimes it's hard to tell. It has to be in like the right kind of soil, or it has to be in snow in order to see it. I think on the next slide, we have some pictures of tracks in the snow. So you can actually see what an actual track would look like. So you can see that they have that, this one is really clear. You'd be lucky to find a track just like this, but you can see there's no claw marks. You can see how the lobes in the front and the back, there's 2 in the front and 3 in the back. And then you can also look for other signs. So just like a house cat, how they kind of like cover up their scat, the same thing. The bobcats will do the same thing. So you can see those scratch marks, and it's covering up the scat that it has right there. And I think these were taken by Charlie, who's our fur bearer biologist, these photos, right?
So I think, Amy, do you recognize this? Is this the spot in Westerly?
That's that cat highway in Westerly.
Yeah, there's like this one little trail. I've been there with you. That like it's so cool. We've got some interesting pictures from there. But I think somebody just said like big fluffy paws. Yes,
Yeah.
like big fluffy paws. And I love that you can almost draw like a perfect circle around them. That's kind of a giveaway for cat tracks too. Dogs are like more of an oval shape overall. Yeah.
And then like obviously the difference between a bobcat versus a house cat, the bobcat is going to be larger than the house cat. So bobcats, the length of their paws are around like 4 to 6 centimeters, where house cat would be much smaller than that.
Tiny. All right, let's move on to our next trivia question. So what's on the menu for bobcat? So here we have kind of a clue here. I'm not sure. I still can't tell in this picture if that's a menu item or a kitten that she's carrying. I can't tell, but let's pretend it's a menu item. So what might bobcats? I'm seeing deer, small mammals, small rodents, small game. Anybody else? Squirrels, rabbits, mice, rabbits. Chickens, rabbits, released pheasants, mice, geese, insects and berries, turkeys, rabbits, and anything of opportunity. All right, lots of good answers here. All right, so the answer is a lot of stuff, right? So we had somebody say rabbits, squirrels, small rodents, things like muskrats, deer. They will take down deer, younger, smaller deer, or deer in deep snow where they can't, run too fast, because deer are pretty adept at running away from things, even snakes, birds. We unfortunately, it's like fortunately and unfortunately, we get a lot of roadkill bobcats in South County along Route 1. So it's unfortunate for the bobcats, and it's never enjoyable to see that, but we are able to take a look at them in the lab at the Fish and Wildlife office, and Charlie, our fur bearer biologist, will do a necropsy on the animal, and he'll even open up the stomach and look at the stomach contents to see what it was eating last. And one day I was in there, you never know what's going to happen when you walk into the office on any given day, like who's dissecting what in the lab. So I walked in, and there's this big bobcat on the table, and there's Charlie, he's dissecting it. I said, oh, what did it eat? And he pulls out a whole squirrel foot. So it had swallowed the foot whole, which was very interesting. So it was kind of piecing together what it had eaten. So they eat a wide variety of things. So as you can imagine, they're very good at controlling small rodent populations. So they're very helpful parts of the ecosystem, as well as just controlling even some small level of deer control. But just acting as predators is important. Okay, so Gabby, you want to take trivia question number 5, and then after this question, we'll break for questions from you guys.
All right, so next question is, how many kittens are in a bobcat litter? 5, 3, 3 to 6, 3 to 4, 2.
This picture's not from Rhode Island.
Only one.
I couldn't find any pictures of little kittens from Rhode Island, but this one's real cute. All right, we've got a lot of numbers coming in. All right.
Shall we reveal the answer?
Let's go.
All right, so those of you that said around 3 were correct. So they have about 3 on average, but that can range obviously depending on the resources that are available. If they have better resources, they can reproduce more, and if they're a healthier female, they can reproduce more. Oh, someone said they witnessed a birth. That
What?
sounds really
Wow.
cool. That would be amazing to see. So they mate around February to May, and then the kittens are born around May to June, and then the kittens will stay with the female because only the female cares for the young all the way until the following spring. Sometimes the juvenile males will leave a little bit earlier. But yeah, so it's 3 on average. And like you saw in the previous picture, they are adorable. So that always helps.
They are super cute. And we do have them breeding in Rhode Island. So that's good. That's all good news. So let's take like a 5-minute break to just do some Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Amy can start sharing hers. So she'll be all set to go for her portion. So if folks want to type any questions into the chat, we'd be happy to take them.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yes, of course. Or you can ask them out loud too.
You were talking about hunting on Rhode Island public lands. Are bobcats hunted?
No, so they are a protected fur bearer in the state of Rhode Island. So they are one of 2 fur bearers on which there is a closed season. So bobcats you can't hunt or trap, and river otters are not able to be hunted or trapped as well.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's just because we don't really, if this is, ties into Amy's research portion, we're trying to track to see where bobcats are, how many we have, so if you don't have a good handle on the population size of a particular species, then there's no reason to be harvesting those animals. Only when you have a good idea that there's enough to sustain a harvest, then you use that science to guide how many are going to be taken, et cetera. So we don't have that answer yet, so it's closed.
Okay.
So any questions?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of questions in the chat. So the next question I saw was, what do they use for a nest?
They use for a nest.
But they don't exactly build a nest like a bird. But like I said, they'll den underneath sheds. They'll go under in like holes and logs or under kind of rock outcroppings when they're raising their young. As far as bringing in materials, I'm not sure if they bring any in. That would be a good question for Amy.
I think so. I think they kind of just use what's around, and they move. They can move. They don't necessarily like pick one spot and stay there. They'll move their kittens around.
So we've got a couple of questions. A few people are asking, like, what's the estimated population of bobcats in Rhode Island? Amy, do you want to explain that a little? And also somebody's asking, do you see many in northern Rhode Island? So that might be a good segue to this map.
Yeah. How many? That's a hard question to answer. One we wanted to answer with our research, but it's tricky. So my best guess is, anywhere from 25 to 100, just large. We did do a genetic analysis, which I was over my head, but my colleagues did that, and they, through the genetics, I think they estimated like 80. So yeah, 25 to 100 is what I'm safe estimating the population at.
So those genetics is just showing how the bobcats that we've caught and tracked, how related.
Yeah, so you mentioned that unfortunately we get a lot of roadkills. So one nice thing that comes from those roadkills is we're able to get a genetic sample and get some more information out of those guys that unfortunately didn't survive. So with that analysis, I think we had like 30 something samples from ones we've trapped and from roadkill. So 30 or so total. And they can see how connected they are. And then my colleague, who's a whiz at genetics, does some stuff that I don't understand and is able to get a estimate of how many they are just by kind of comparing, like, this one's really related to this one, but this one's not. So we can say that, there's family members from those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even with counting any wildlife, it's so tricky because You know, we're doing like a mark recapture essentially with GPS collars. So you catch the animal, you let it go, and then maybe you'll catch it again. That's you know, kind of the way that we can estimate bird population sizes. Mammals are like notoriously tricky because they're super secretive. They don't like to be caught. They move, you know, so any animal that's moving, they're not setting up their little residence and filling out the census. So it's tough, you know, there's methods of doing it where you can mark animals and let them go. You can fly in a helicopter and try to count animals. That works for things like waterfowl because they're kind of staying put on the water. But as you can imagine, like a bobcat, like if you were standing 20 feet from a bobcat in the woods, you probably wouldn't even know it's there because they're so camouflaged. So flying over isn't really an option. So that can be very tricky for smaller mammals, but that's why this data kind of gives us an idea, and also sightings, you know, as people send in their observations. So that's a very important aspect of it, which we can put in the chat. Gabby, if you want to toss in the chat the link for everybody to see. So we have an observations like sheet that you can say like, I saw this animal, how do I submit my observation? Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about this map? Because folks are asking if we're seeing.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of questions pop up that I hope I'll answer when I'm talking about the research, but if I don't, if my answer is not sufficient, feel free to circle back at the end and I'll try to answer stuff for you. So this map that is up on the screen, and you can all see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay. I believe this was our sighting reports map. So Charlie, the fur bear biologist that we've talked about, we all love Charlie. He's an amazing resource here in Rhode Island. He's been keeping track of bobcat sightings in Rhode Island for as long as he's been at DEM, and he's been at DEM for 20 something years. So these are all points on the map where someone called in and said, hey, I saw a bobcat. We always try to confirm that because sometimes people's eyes deceive them, or they're not so familiar with what a bobcat actually looks like. So we always try to confirm with like a more specific description, or a photo is super good. So this is just a map of where all of those sightings have taken place, and it's pretty much everywhere. There's a huge kind of bubble down in South County along the coastline, and it's hard to tell if it's because there's more bobcats there or there's more people there that are seeing the bobcats. I kind of think it's probably a combination of both, whereas you don't see as much going on up in the northwest corner. There's not as much people there, so they probably just aren't seeing them. So they are everywhere. I think there's been confirmed sightings in all, except for Providence and the urban areas. I think in every town there's been a confirmed sighting now. There's a few spots in the map where it doesn't show that, but we have them now. This map's a few years old. So they're pretty widespread. You can find them pretty much anywhere. Let me come back. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So
I'm just still figuring out my screen.
Yeah. So Amy, we just have a couple more questions before we. Yeah. A lot of these questions that folks are asking, Amy will answer these just in the course of her section of the talk. So we've got one question. Oh, so noting the recent mountain lion video that went viral. Oh my goodness. So if folks have not seen that video, there's a guy on a trail, saw a mountain lion kitten. Yeah. The mother was laying down like a little ways away from the kitten. He was walking up to it with his phone.
That's crazy.
And then the mother started chasing him, which makes sense, right? Because like you don't mess with anybody's baby, right? She's like, get away from my baby. I'm going to run after you. So that went viral. It's unfortunately, that's a really silly choice to be making, especially with large animals like that and predators. So the question is, are there any animals in Rhode Island that we should be aware of, how to avoid, and to stay safe while hiking? And the same question for hiking at night. So bobcats, I would say you do not have to worry about really at all, because the bobcat's going to be gone before you even knew it was there. So they do not want to be around people. They're super secretive. So So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. Coyotes, I think there's been like one incident with a coyote and a hiker in Rhode Island with a couple coyotes, and there was a dog involved too. So I think the coyotes were more attracted towards the dog than the person. So always, just keeping your pets, under control with a leash is always good. When you're hiking, we recommend that because it's much easier to keep your pet close to you while you're hiking than letting them go. So in our management areas, you're required to have the dog on a leash unless it's a hunting dog and you're actively hunting with that dog. So I would say, coyotes, yes, be careful, but really not a huge concern. Gabby and I have been out at night filming stuff for our videos that we've been making, and also taking people out for nighttime programs. And we've heard coyotes, not too far off from us, and we've never had an issue. So just, maintaining your distance, and, if anything ever approached you, making loud noises, making yourself look bigger, you can throw something at them to kind of spook them away. And now we have bears in the state as well. If anybody tuned into our bear talk, we just did one. It is on YouTube as well, if you didn't get to watch it. Bears, again, same thing. Bears really don't want to be around people unless you have food. So making sure that you secure your coolers or anything while you're camping, putting those in a car can help. Again, just making loud noises and being big and intimidating can help. But really, here in Rhode Island, there's nothing that you should be too concerned about. When you go out west and there's grizzlies and mountain lions, then there's a little bit more concern. You have to take some more cautions.
I was just going to say too, just someone mentioned rabies in bobcats. So bobcats can contract rabies because any mammal can, even a deer can get rabies, but we haven't had any reports of bobcats with rabies in Rhode Island. So not a huge concern with them, but just like any other animal, just be cautious around wildlife. You never know. It could be sick. All right, and I'll let Amy keep talking.
And then this one last question before we move on, because I think a lot of these are going to get answered by Amy in just a second. So one other question that's interesting: have you ever found anyone who trapped a bobcat? If so, what is the penalty? So yes, so there were some issues with somebody who did shoot a bobcat because they thought it was a coyote that was attacking their chicken coop. Another incident, I think there was another incident with a guy who either trapped or hunted the bobcat and then took a picture of it and put it on social media, which was very foolish, but also very fortuitous because the environmental police saw it and knew exactly where to find this person who had broken the law. So I'm not sure what the fine was on that. I think whoever accidentally shot the bobcat thinking it was a coyote, they reported it and they said, okay, well, I made a mistake. They realized what happened after they had done it. So I'm not sure if they faced any penalty because they fessed up to it and realized that their error. But I'm not sure what the exact fine is for that. My guess is that, if you're knowingly trapping something that has a closed season, that could be grounds for taking away your hunting license or not allowing you to have that anymore, or confiscating firearms. So that's a question for environmental police. We could get the EPOs out here to do a talk about, we get a lot of these types of questions. What's the fine? What's the penalty? Because we do have.
So one interesting thing, because they're not only not a hunted species in Rhode Island, there's no season for them here. They're protected under, it's called CITES. It's the Convention of International Trade on Endangered Species. So they're not an endangered species, but because their fur is similar to things that are endangered, they're essentially a controlled species in that regard. So unless you have a special tag, even if you're, if you live in an area where you can trap and hunt bobcats, you need a special tag to be able to turn in the fur, which is generally why people are trapping bobcats. So you're not going to get one here, so you will not have anywhere to bring your fur. A taxidermist around here would not do anything with anything that's caught. So there's really no good reason to be trapping bobcats here.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, so with that, we'll turn it over to Amy and we want to talk about some
Cool.
Bobcat research. And I'll toss in one last question. Somebody asked, what's your preferred brand of trail camera?
Ooh, ooh. The one on the slide here is a Bushnell, which we've been using a lot, but we've actually switched over to Brownings. They have a really nice new camera that's affordable and pretty great. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of trail camera stuff. So my research project with URI and DEM has been a 5, 6, it was originally 5-year, we got an extension, so now we're on a 6-year plan. We're almost done. We just finished up our last trail camera season, so now I'm just locked in my office here processing data for the next 3 months until we have everything ready to go. So what we've been doing, the goal of this project was to just basically understand more about bobcats in the state. They'd never been studied before. Like Mary said, they've been here all along, but for a lot of years they were considered rare. And now they're listed under our state wildlife action plan, which is a big, huge document you can find on DEM's website if you like reading a 100-page thing. Some of the stuff is super interesting in there. But now they're listed as a species of greatest conservation need. And basically that's because we don't have any official data on them other than the stuff that Charlie's been collecting, sighting reports and roadkill data and things like that. So we started this project to kind of get baseline data because the number of sighting reports seem to be going up. And that is kind of consistent with what's going on throughout all of the Northeast and even across the country. And no one really knows why bobcat numbers appear to be increasing. But we figured, hey, there's this carnivore in our state that we don't know anything about, but its numbers are going up, so we should probably get some information on them. So I mentioned we wanted to get population numbers. That was kind of one of the goals, but that turned out to be pretty difficult. So we kind of switched gears a little bit. We wanted to know about what habitats they were using, what their distribution was, and then with the trail cameras, we can't really get population numbers, but we can get better ideas of what areas they might be using and kind of their distribution and density. So we're able to get a lot of interesting information. Okay, so to get at the habitat and how much space they're using, their home range, our first plan of action was to try and trap some of these guys. So we used these box traps like you saw in the last picture. I was setting that. And here's one that we actually were successful catching. So we would bait it. You see a little feathery thing in there. Some of the hunters at the DEM office, after they would kind of get the meat they needed from the ducks during hunting season, they would donate the rest of the carcass to us to use as bait. We found that the bobcats really liked. They weren't so much into the bait so much as things that looked fun. If you think about your cat at home, you get all sorts of weird cat toys with feathers and bells and all sorts of stuff. They're visual hunters more than using their scent. They like something that catches their attention. So that's what we would use to kind of convince them to go into our traps. We used feathers. I had like tinfoil hanging from fishing line that would kind of blow in the wind. And all sorts of, I have a whole bag of just like random cat toys that I made. It was a fun little crafting day of putting together weird stuff. It's like, oh, maybe the cat would like this. I even had this jelly that I bought from a hunting and fishing catalog that glowed in the dark. So I would take this glow in the dark jelly and like smear it on stuff around the trap. And I don't know how well it worked. I thought it was pretty fun, but yeah, so we were trapping them using this live trap. So they just go in there. We check the trap every morning, first thing in the morning. And if we were lucky enough to catch one of these guys, we would call on our team. We would have to anesthetize them because, they're carnivores and they have claws. So to keep everybody safe, we would anesthetize them in the field and do everything we needed to do after that. Let's see. I don't remember what's on the next slide. There we go. So here's a picture up in the corner. This is Charlie, the fur bearer biologist. This is one of the bobcats we caught. So once they're anesthetized, you see him, he's sleeping there. We collected all sorts of information. We weighed them, measured them. got like their, I think I'm measuring his neck circumference there. So all sorts of quality data we're collecting there. We would also collect tissue samples and blood samples, again, for that genetic stuff that I was talking about earlier. And then we put an ear tag in so that we could identify it later on. We also put in, it's called a PIT tag, a passive something transponder. It's kind of the same thing you have in your, my dog has one, so that, you know, if she ever gets lost, the vet can identify her. So we put one of those in the Bobcat as well, so we can keep track of who's who. And what else do we do? Oh, if it was the appropriate size, we would put a collar on it so that we could follow it around. We had pretty strict size limits. We only wanted the collar to go on if it was a big enough animal, because the collars do weigh a certain amount and we didn't want to weigh them down or kind of negatively affect them in any way. So this one did get a collar, the one that we're working on in this photo. And then that collar was designed to stay on for a full year. And then it had a little doohickey on it with a timer. And then after a year, it was supposed to break off and we could collect the collar. But in the meantime, we were able to kind of keep track of it and download the data. So in this picture, I'm here with my buddy Mary, and we are tracking the Bobcat. It was in a field kind of near my car there. And that thing I'm holding in my hand is a remote downloader doohickey, the technical term. If we were in a certain distance of the animal, so it's always emitting a radio ping. So I would drive around for hours just listening to static on this radio receiver and listening for a beep, beep. If I heard that magical beep, I would try to get as close as possible to the beeping, because I knew that that Bobcat was in the woods somewhere. And then with that receiver, I was able to remotely download. You had to be fairly close, probably within like 50 to 100 meters. So when it worked awesome, and you could, I could keep track of the Bobcat throughout its time out in the woods. So I would try to do that like every 2 weeks, just to kind of keep getting data and not lose track of it. So then this is the data that we would get. So all these little dots on the map, that is a location where there was a Bobcat. So on this map, there are 4 of them there. So we mostly did our trapping down in South County just because I work at URI, and that was the most convenient for me for checking traps. And that's also where we get a lot of sightings. So there were a lot of really great places to set up traps, and a lot of really, there's a fair amount of public land, and we worked with a lot of land trusts and private landowners that allowed us to set up traps. So we kind of focused our efforts down there for the first part. So all those little dots, again, are from an individual Bobcat. They're all different colors. So the purple one, you know, spent a lot of time up in like up near Bonnet Shores, or is that like up near Casey Farm over there? And then you see they kind of move a whole lot. That one purple guy was up here and then went all the way basically to Westerly and back. The same with this blue guy, went all the way to Connecticut and then came back. So what we found was that they were moving a ton. So that's another reason why it's difficult to estimate how many we have. Because you'll say, oh, well, I saw some in Narragansett, and oh, I saw one in North Kingstown, I saw one in Hopkinton. So there's got to be, you know, that's got to be 3 different Bobcats. That could be the same Bobcat. They move a ton. And that's not a huge amount of time either. Like the one that, let's see, blue guy, we were only able to follow the blue one for about 4 months, because unfortunately it did get hit by a car. So in the 4 months, it went from South Kingstown to Connecticut and back. And that little jaunt there was probably only a week, because I lost it when I went to Connecticut. I didn't think to drive all the way over there with my little antenna on my car. It luckily came back and we were able to pick up the signal, but they move a ton. So this other crazy map with a blob, that's the stuff I do on my computer when I'm not in the woods, is figuring out their home range. So this was some crazy math and stuff we had to do and some wild programs, but it spits out a blob that basically estimates how much space they're using. So it takes all those points, does some some crazy statistics and then says, all right, this is its home range. So for this guy, you can see there's a big blob of purple dots up there. That's where what we call its core use area, where it spends the majority of its time. It can spend other time moving around further out, but that's where it's gonna spend the most of its time. And that's interesting because we would then go to that area and be like, well, what's so special about that spot? Why does it want to spend all of its time there? Is it the habitat? Is there food? What's going on? So we can get a lot of information just from these little dots on the map. So throughout the study, how many did we collar? I think we collared 6. We got good data. There's 4 dots on here. This red blob, that collar broke after a couple weeks, unfortunately. That happens, it's technology. You just have to plan for that. So we ended up with data for 3 bobcats that were like really usable and we can put into our research reports at the end of this project. Oh geez, how do I go back? Go back, okay. So then we realized, okay, trapping, while it's super cool and super fun, we're not getting the numbers we need to actually get the data we want for this project to be successful. So we kind of switched gears and we're like, all right, how can we cover more ground, less time, still get tons of data? So we switched to trail cameras and we switched big. We started out small. We did 20 sites just in South County, but now we're up to 100 sites and we've been surveying 100 sites statewide for, let's see, 2 winters, 2 summers, I believe. And that's 200 cameras because at each site we're putting 2 cameras. So if you do the math, I have like 400,000 photos in my database that I get to go through and say, that's a deer, that's a possum, there's a bobcat, that's a coyote. So it's been a ton of work, but we get so much data out of it. So all of these pictures are from our trail cameras. So some of them we had set up at our trap sites while we were trapping, just so we could see what was going on and like, why aren't we catching anything? So this picture, this is my favorite, and it's like a perfect photo to describe my trapping experience. So I don't know if you could see it, but there is 1 cat, 2 cats, and then there's a 3rd cat in the background. You see his little glowing eyes back there. So in this series of photos, this is just the end product. That trap door is closed right now. It had been open. I was trying to trap on that night. So the first picture showed 1 cat go into the trap, and then the second bobcat was like right behind it. So when the door tripped, because bobcat number 1 got to the back, bobcat number 2 was standing in the doorway. So they were both able to scoot out. And then bobcat number 3 showed up and is lurking in the back. And I don't know if you could see up here, this is one of my cat toys. It's a little ball of feathers. So these 3 cats just kind of hung out at my trap site for like 20 minutes trying to get to this cat toy. So that was just like a perfect story. That's what happened so many times, is that, you know, they'd come to the trap, they'd go in, the door, I don't know, maybe the trap was frozen so the door didn't shut, or it didn't shut all the way and they were able to scoot back out. So we had a lot of issues like that. But we got some funny pictures and some funny stories out of it, at least. So we had them at the trap site so we could see what was going on, but then we also had them at other locations throughout the state so we could see, you know, what's going on not at our trap site. So this was one that was actually collared that happened to walk by one of our survey sites, which was super cool and posed perfectly in front of the camera. So I have, you know, like I said, like 400,000 photos that we've been going through. I'm down to my final 6,000 before I'm done. Yeah, it's a ton of photos, but it's really cool to see what's going on, because not only do you get your bobcat photos, but you get all sorts of other stuff, which we can then do some analysis on and get other research products out of it. So these are some of the other cool stuff that we see. We see pretty much anything you can think of. The funniest one is the chicken. Why was there a chicken there? I don't know. But we get all sorts of cool animals on our trail cameras. And so I'm really excited about that, because not only can we do our analysis on the bobcats and see like, all right, this camera was in an area that had, 20% forest, but it was near a subdivision. So why was it here? So we're going to do some cool analysis to see why they're at certain camera sites and not others. And then down the road, what we're going to do is hopefully a multi-species analysis. So we can see like, all right, if there's a bobcat here, are we going to see a gray fox, or are gray fox keeping the bobcats away? So we can look at different interactions of all these cool species. So trail cameras were, while trapping was super great, and we did get some good information. This is really going to give us so much more data to work with, and it's I'm really excited to like dig into some of this data. The cool thing is we got a lot of good fisher pictures, and we have a big fisher project starting in December. So all these photos that I've been taking for the last 4 or 5 years are going to get funneled into that project, so we get a good head start on looking at what our fisher population is doing. Were there any other slides? That's my research.
Yeah. So Amy, actually, if you want to go back to that,
yeah,
the trail camera. So Amy is wonderful, and I use the trail camera photos. I ask the public to send them in, and we have a children's magazine, and there's a page where I ask kids to send in their captions for some of the photos. And Amy has single-handedly curated all of the photos for the children's magazine, probably for the next 10 years, because she goes through those 400,000 photos and then sends me the best ones. So these are just some of my personal favorites. I love this one with the raccoon hanging upside down. That one cracks me up. That's going to be our fall caption contest that'll be coming out in a couple of weeks. And then this coyote I picked out because I don't know if he's got like a cataract or something going on.
I know. Yeah.
So one eye is not glowing in the camera, and the coyote that was next to him in the photo, or in the next photo, both of them are looking at the camera and both eyes are glowing on the other coyote. So I'm wondering if he's got like some sort of injury or something. I thought it was just so interesting. Plus he looks like he's smiling at the camera. So I'll use him someday for my caption contest.
We also got a picture. I don't know. It wasn't the best quality, so I don't know if it popped up on your radar, but there was a deer with only 3 legs.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't see that one. Wow.
Yeah, I had to like do a double take. I'm like, something's not quite right with this deer, and I like kept going back. I'm like, it's missing one of his front legs.
Wow. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, you never know what you're gonna get. There was a great blue heron on that same one with the chicken, walking up the path, and then you have a bobcat walking down the same path. Owls, hawks. Some of the best ones were the songbirds too, because they're like hiding in the branch and the camera picks up on them. Or if you're like me and you set up a trail camera, you get 600 photos of a leaf going like this back and forth on a very windy, rainy night. So,
yeah, got a lot of those too.
The grass blowing. I get that.
Yeah, you're like, what did I get 600 photos of? A leaf. So this is the cream of the crop of trail camera photos. So that's about all we have. Amy, if you want to just click to that next slide.
I just posted, in case anyone is interested, now I posted the link to our Bobcat fact sheet. So if we forgot to mention anything, or you're curious about more things that we like missed, and we don't answer your questions right now, you can click on that fact sheet, and it has a little bit more about bobcats, and bobcats specifically in Rhode Island.
Yeah, so if anybody has any extra questions that we didn't answer, we'd be happy to take them. We encourage everyone to, if you don't already and you're on social media, we have an Instagram and a Facebook where we post information about events like this. We post, occasionally we do a Trail Camera Tuesday, so if you love trail camera photos, I've got many of them from Amy that will be going through there.
We'll be getting more.
Yeah, I'm excited. Every time I check that little Google Drive folder, I'm like, ooh, it's like Christmas. So, but thank you all so much for joining us. We hope that you join us again for another program. We'll be doing a winter series with some different topics, and we'll hopefully just continue this until we can all be together again in person. So thank you so much.
I also just posted, in case anyone is interested, a link to the Wildlife Outreach page. So that will also bring you to our upcoming events and let you know when, if ever, we get to see you all in person again.
We will, Gabby, we will.
We will one day.
Happen one day. Oh, I'm waiting for it, but. Awesome.
Oh, someone from Alabama.
Alabama. Wow.
They're tuning in.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if we have a minute, if anyone else is hanging on here, but someone had been asking about what they can do to help wildlife. And so I said, report any wildlife that you see. And I also mentioned, bringing in food resources to kind of keep or eliminate the human wildlife conflicts. But if there's anything else that you guys want to mention before we exit.
Native plants.
Native plants, yes, absolutely. All wildlife rely on native plants, particularly pollinators and birds. So researching your Rhode Island native plants is like key if you have a garden, even if you don't have a huge garden. Like this summer, I planted butterfly milkweed in my little bed that's next to the street. And I thought, well, we'll see what happens. I had monarch caterpillars in my little suburban yard on my butterfly milkweed. So, it really makes a difference. Even the smallest space, if you can put a native plant on it, they'll find it. Gabby, did you, if we want to post that report wildlife?
Yeah, I'll put it again.
One more time, because we had a couple more questions, like what do I do to submit a picture? Mary's asking, it's still so warm, when to put away when to put out the bird feeders. So we recommend in November, but it is warm. So, I mean, if it's not super, super cold, we could still have bears wandering around, maybe looking for a nice bird seed snack. So maybe, wait until it gets a little cooler in November.
Yeah, Charlie sent a picture yesterday, maybe. Time is irrelevant now. But I think it was yesterday. Someone saw a bear in Hopkinton, I think.
Oh wow!
So they're still out.
It's so warm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I had all the windows open today. I'm wearing flip flops. I'm going, what? It's almost Halloween. What's happening here?
There's someone tuning in from Connecticut.
Actually, is there anything we can do to help? I'm assuming the bobcat population if you live in northern Rhode Island. So just maintaining that nice habitat on your property is really great. Making sure that and we always say like leaving out any sort of food source, whether that's bird feeder food or securing your trash, making sure your compost is covered, pet food coming inside, securing your chickens, all of these things that we can do to reduce any sort of food source that may be coming from humans can help not only bobcats, but a huge variety of wild animals in the state. So just making sure that we keep our wildlife wild, observing from a distance and really like doing an audit of your property and thinking like, all right, what could potentially draw in a critter as a snack, because reducing those human sources of food is really key.
Another thing to mention too, so we know like bobcats, they'll eat small rodents and things. So not using rodenticides, so things like rat poison. If you want to get rid of mice or rodents, just don't use that poison, because a ton of things will eat the rats and the mice that you're aiming for, and the poison will stay in their system and they'll be alive for a little while. And like an owl could come down, or a raptor or a bobcat could eat that. And if they eat enough, then they can actually get poisoning from the mice that they're eating. So try not to use that whenever possible. Use any other method, basically. Not glue traps; those also aren't the best.
The snap trap it sounds gruesome, but it's actually the most humane. Your old-fashioned snap trap mouse trap.
I gotta have a heart trap for my mice, so you can do that. I was like, I can't do it. They're so cute.
Come back outside. They might come back.
They're gonna come back in.
Come back out. You're okay with
the holes.
Yeah. So we've got another question. You find people respect the hunting regulations? Yeah, I would say for the most part. And people are pretty, like they kind of like all the hunters, I feel like if they see something, they say something. They're not, because that ruins it for everybody else in the hunting community when people start just completely disregarding the regulations. We see a bunch of issues with marine fisheries, a lot of violations of marine fisheries, whether it's tautog or whelks or whatever it might be, people taking undersized stuff, taking too many. And the environmental police are really good at getting those people. And we do a lot, we actually do social media posts about it. They'll post, you know, what's going on. We caught somebody with, I think it was like 1,000 whelks one day, and like half of them were undersized, or it was like outrageous. So they do a pretty good job of catching the people. But you know, as always, like if you notice that there's something wrong, you can always call the environmental police, and they're happy to hear from you to find out, you know, who's breaking the rules. But for the most part, people are pretty respectful of that.
All right. I don't think I see any more questions. And I think we have gone about 10 minutes over.
Yep.
So thank you everyone for tuning in and staying with us.
Yeah, I know some people may not have eaten dinner yet, so
I know I'm hungry.
So thank you all so much. We hope to see you again at another virtual event, or hopefully in the future, join us in person. We'd love to meet you all. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording now. I think we're good on recording.